Hello everyone, my name is Jordan and welcome back to another episode of the Bukkit coding series. Today we're going to be taking the NPC code we created last episode and making that work across most versions of the Bukkit/Spigot server. And this is going to use a technique called reflection, so this is going to be a more advanced geared Bukkit coding tutorial. So if you don't understand it, that's okay. It is very difficult to grasp reflection and all this. Now, I would like to say a quick thank you to people on the Spigot forums because I couldn't even get this stuff to run properly. When I first programmed it, I had to do quite a lot of changes to get a lot of my original code working again with reflection. So huge shout out to them and their advice. And I'm ready to go ahead and show you all this tutorial after days and days of research on how to get this to work. So first of all, we're going to go ahead and modify a few things in our NPC class. So basically, let me quickly explain what reflection is. So reflection is a Java tool that allows us to access classes without directly referencing those classes. So for instance, I could get an instance of this Minecraft server without actually typing out that Minecraft server as like an actual class, which basically means we're no longer dependent on this package. So when this version ever changes between Bukkit releases, that's not an issue for us. So let's go ahead and type out some code. So first of all, what we need to do is we need to create about 4 methods here. The first thing is a private void, and these are all going to be private. We're going to call this send packet, and then it's going to take in a player and an object packet. Packet. And we're going to mark this as to do because we're not going to get to it just yet. Second thing, we're going to have a private class and then diamond brackets with a question mark inside. We're going to call this get NMS class string name. We're just going to for now return null. We're going to make a private class question mark get craft bucket class, and that's going to take in a string name. And again, we're going to return null for right here. And then we're going to go ahead and last have a private string get version. And so this is going to have no arguments for intaking. So let's go ahead and write out this get version method and then the other methods afterwards. So let's go ahead and say return. So we're going to return a new string right off the bat. And we're going to say bucket.getServer, getServer.getClass. And let me explain what this is doing. So inside of the getServer method, this is going, or not inside of getServer, but inside of the Bukkit class, which is right here, we're using this getServer method, which returns this server object. And inside of here, we're calling getClass. Now, getClass is not declared in here. This is a default method inside of Java for almost any object. For instance, I could say string, or I could just do something like this, and then I could say .getClass, and this is going to return a string class because that's the type of that string. For right here, this is going to get our class of the server. Now what we want to do is we want to say .getPackage to get the package it's inside. We're going to get the name of the package, and we're going to split it using the string split method. We're going to do 2 backslashes to escape, and then we're going to do it dot. And let me quickly explain what we just wrote out there. So we basically have a package here. We have net.minecraft.server and then v1_8_r3 dot and then x. We'll just leave it blank. And so you can see we have this imported right here as net.minecraft.server.v18r3, and right here we have the same thing. The Bukkit number is also the same. So right here, this is what we're doing. We're getting the class of the Bukkit server. We're getting its package, so this whole string right here, or not that string, but we're getting the package. Then we're getting the name, which would be that whole string there, except for the Bukkit package. And then we're going to split it up at the dot. So it's going to turn all this into an array. So net would be its own object, Minecraft server, and then v18r3. That's all separate strings inside of our array. And then we're going to get the third one, or actually the fourth item in there in that array, which would be 0, 1, 2, 3. Or our fourth element, which is v18r3. So that's basically how you get that v18r3 out of there. Now inside of get NMS class, we're going to go ahead and type out some code. We're going to say try and catch, and we're going to catch a class not found exception, ex. In here we're going to say ex.printStackTrace, and down here we're going to say return null. Up here we're going to go ahead and type in return class.forName net.minecraft.server dot, and then we need to say dot. We need to say plus get version, and then a dot, and then we say plus, and then name. So now that we have our NMS class method done, we're going to copy and paste this code into the getCraftBucket class method, and we're just going to change this net.minecraft to server.org.bucket.craftBucket, and that's it. So now we have both these methods done. We're going to come back to sendPacket once we need to do that. Now let's go ahead and go into our spawn method. This is the first thing that we're going to convert into reflection. So we're going to keep all that code right here, or all this code right here, and we're going to put all of our reflection code in a try-catch block. And it's just going to print the exception whenever there is one. Okay, so now we want to say object Minecraft server is going to be equal to getCraftBucket class, and I'm going to explain what all this does after I type this bit out. We're going to say craft server, so we're getting the craft server. We're going to say get method, get server, dot invoke, bucket, dot get server. Let me explain what this does. We're getting the CraftBucket class, this is so hard to say, it's tongue twisters. We're getting the CraftBucket class craft server, which is this right here, and we're getting a method inside called get server, and we're invoking it using this argument of bucket.getServer. And basically that's this line of code just for reflection. I'm sure there's different ways you could do it. This is just the method that I figured out how to do. I did not take any of this code from anywhere, except for little bits and pieces in the Spigot forums for the show method replacement, because that was what I had trouble with. And the reason for that is reflection is basically impossible to find tutorials on, which is why this was such a hard video to make. But regardless, this is how I did it here. Obviously, if you wanted to change it for whatever reason, you could. But yeah, that's how I wrote it here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to make a world server object, just like we did below here. And we're going to say object world server equals get CraftBucket class craft world dot get method get handle, get handle, and then we're just going to do the same thing we did before, invoke, and then we're going to say location dot get world. This, again, is basically this line of code converted into reflection. You don't really need to worry about a whole lot of the specifics other than the fact the formatting is a lot different because we can't cast things in reflection. Okay, you know what? I take that back. I think you can cast things in reflection. It's just a super pain, and I don't want to have to deal with that. So we're doing it this way. Anyway, we can now go ahead and copy paste the game profile things in here because luckily game profile is a Mojang library, which means we don't need to do any reflection on that, which was a blessing. And now let's go ahead and convert our last two lines of code into reflection. So we're going to go ahead and make a constructor because that's what we're doing right here. This is calling this constructor and making a new entity player off that constructor. So we need to go ahead and say constructor, constructor, if I could type, diamond brackets, question mark. So we're basically saying this is an unknown type constructor or an inferred type. Can't remember exactly which one of the two it is. So we're going to say constructor, diamond brackets, question mark, entity player constructor, construct, if I can spell constructor, there we go, equals get NMS class, entity player, dot get declared constructor, and then what we need to do is go ahead and decompile the entity player. And I am actually doing this on the fly because I realized that the code I wrote before is not entirely a smart way to do that. Oh, you know what? It's the only constructor. You know what? Never mind. We're just going to delete that real quick. We're just going to say get declared constructors. Get declared constructors, index of 0, because I realized there's only one class, or one constructor inside of the entity player class, so that's why I wrote it that way. Never mind. I was being smart earlier. Anyway, now that we have this entity player constructor, which is basically this right here, we need to go ahead and create one more constructor. So we're going to say constructor, again, with the diamond brackets, question mark. We're going to call this interact manager constructor. Constructor equals get NMS class, player interact manager. And that's getting this constructor right here, so we can use this inside of our entity player constructor. Hopefully that makes sense. And we're going to say get declared constructors index of 0. Make sure that all of your spelling here is correct, or else none of this will work. I just realized that. Okay, now that we have those two constructors, let's go ahead and do something up here in the top of the class. We're going to rename entity player to object. This is going to cause all the code involving entity player to break, so we're just going to go ahead and hide it or comment it. So now that we have that good to go, I don't think there's anything we have to replace anymore. You know what? We can remove our imports now. And we are now no longer using any net.minecraft.server direct imports. So we're getting closer. Okay, anyway, now you can just go ahead and say entity player constructor. Or actually, this .entity player equals entity player constructor.new instance. And we're going to go ahead and instantiate this with Minecraft server, world server, game profile, and interact manager constructor.new instance with the world server. And again, this is just basically this method right here converted into reflection. So we're calling this calling the constructor, and then this interact manager constructor is this right here. Okay, now let's go ahead and do one more line for setting our location of the entity player. And we're just going to say this.entity player.get class.get method set location. We need to say double.class 3 times, and I'll explain what this is in a second. And then we have float.class and another float.class. Now, what exactly is this right here? This is getting our set location method, or a set location method inside of entity player that takes in all of these arguments. So it's going to take in an x, a y, a z, a yaw, and a pitch. And the types of those are double, 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 float, and float in that order. And that's why we plug that in there. So we're just getting the correct method that we want. Then at the very end, we're going to say invoke entity player, and we're going to say location.getX, location.getY, location.getZ, whoops, location.getYaw, and finally location.getPitch. Okay, and so now it's highlighting all my code because I've already programmed it. So that's not going to happen to you, but ignore this right here. Is there able to? No, I can't turn that off. Anyway, that's our code right there. I'm going to quickly change a few things about it just to make sure this highlighting goes away. Somehow, how can I make this different? I'm not quite sure, but just go ahead and ignore this right here. And actually, to make this work, I will just comment out. There we go. So now that's our code. That issue won't happen to you. That's just because I've already done this before to make sure that all the information I'm giving to you guys is correct and will actually work. Okay, so let's hop down into our show method and go to the top here. We're going to have another try catch as expected here. And we're going to print a stack trace if there is any. Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. So I've organized this in a way that will just make sense to me. Obviously, not everything has to be specifically in this order, and you'll see exactly what I mean in just a second. Okay, we're going to say object add player enum equals get NMS class packet play out player info, and then we need a $, and I'll explain this in just 1 second. Enum player info action. And we're going to say .get field add underscore player .get null. Okay, so here's what we're doing. We're saying, okay, we're going to get a new object called add player enum, and we're going to access the NMS class enum player info action, and that's a subclass, that's what this $, means, of this packet playout player info class. And we're going to get a field inside called add underscore player, and we're going to get null, which basically just makes it work properly. Now, it says get field, but we're actually getting enum. This is just one way you can do it. There's one other way. I think I'll just show you real quick. You could just say .get enum constants index of 0. I prefer to have it written out as that add player because it makes me visualize exactly what we're doing, and so I can go back and change that if I have to. And it just makes a little bit more sense to me to do it that way. People in the Spigot forum said I shouldn't do it that way, but again, there's your pros and cons. It's not a super big deal if you write it out. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a new line. We're going to say constructor, so another one of these constructors with the inferred type. Packet play out player info constructor. If I could spell, that'd be great. And we're going to say get NMS class packet play out player info .get constructor, and it's going to be the one that takes in some types. And so the first type is going to be what we've already typed out right here. So it's just going to be an enum player info action and then comma. And then here's where it's going to get a little confusing. So we need to go ahead and make this a type of entity player list. Now there are a few ways you could, again, there's always a few ways to do things in reflection. This is just the way I have written out from my previous example. I'm sure it could be changed to work better or look better, but this is just what I have typed out, and I know it works, so this is what I'm going to show. We're going to type class.forename just like we did in the get NMS class methods, and we're going to do some parentheses here, or double quotes. We're going to type in a left bracket. We're going to type in a capital L. We're going to say net.minecraft.server dot, and then plus get version plus entity player, and then a semicolon. Now let me explain exactly what this is. When you have an array in Java and you call the toString method, this is what it's going to produce. It's going to produce this left bracket L and then the type of the array and then a semicolon at the end. This is basically just saying, okay, we're going to get an array of entity players here, and that's just how I've done this in Reflection. Now, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you look at it, so it's not entirely human-friendly, but of course, you can change it if you really need to, and it's not super difficult. Just look up some Reflection creating arrays or something like that. Anyway, that's how we're doing it here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and go new line a couple times, and we're going to go ahead and say object. We're going to call this array equals array dot new instance. So we're going to create a new instance of an array. We're going to say get NMS class entity player, and we're going to say comma 1. And so what this does, this creates a new array with the type of entity player, and it's going to have the length for one object. We can go ahead and say array and capital dot set, and then we pass in our array, and we say 0 for our 0 index, so our first object. And we say this dot entity player. So that basically just creates an array and adds our entity player to it. If you were to spawn multiple NPCs at one time using this, you could just add them all to the same array, send the same packet to save data. But for this method, we're only having this one NPC show method called. So let's go ahead and do some more downward spaces. And we're going to say object packet play out player info equals packet playout info constructor dot new instance add player enum and array. Whoops, not the same thing twice. Array. And then all we have to do is say send packet playout player info. And so now we are getting closer to done. Now let me go ahead and explain what this does. So we have this add player enum, and it accesses from this class here, this subclass. We have a constructor for our packet. We have an array that only has our entity player inside, and we create the packet and we send it to the player using this unfinished send packet method. That is exactly what this line of code is doing here, or not quite. Well, yeah, actually, that's what this line of code is doing here. It is very, very bulky to do it in Reflection, so I highly advise not using Reflection for a lot of things if you can, but this is just, Reflection is a decent way to get this type of thing done, where you can run this on most versions of Java. Now, there is one way you cannot use Reflection, and that is by creating multiple different classes that do the same thing with different imports of Bukkit to make sure everything works properly. Now, of course, this is a Reflection tutorial, so I'm not going to go over that. But again, you can see here there is a trade-off when you're using Reflection as compared to standard Java code. Anyway, so now we've sent our packet playout player info. We need to send these two more packets. We need to send the packet playout named entity spawn and this head rotation. This head rotation is something I commented below last episode that I added because that'll allow head rotations to work properly. I'm not quite sure why they don't work in the first place, but that's how you fix it if you add a custom skin onto your NPC, which I'm sure you'll all do because there really isn't a point in having a empty skinned NPC. I could be wrong though. Anyway, now what we want to do is we want to say constructor again. Whoops, constructor with invert type. I'm gonna remove that import. And then we're gonna call this our packet playout player. Packet playout named entity spawn constructor, and this is going to be NMS class packet playout named entity spawn. So it's just going to get that class for us. We're going to get the constructor that takes in an entity human. So just get NMS class entity human. Now that we have our proper constructor, this one's a lot easier. We can just say object packet playout named entity spawn equals the constructor dot new instance this dot entity player. A lot easier to do it here as compared to the previous. For some reason, this was functioning quite odd as compared to some other Reflection I've done in the past. And then all we have to do is just send that packet to the player using our unfinished send packet method. Okay, so that's our second packet. I'm just going to add some comments in here. Packet play out player info. And in here we're going to say packet play out named entity spawn. And then down here we're going to say packet play out entity head rotation. Okay. And for our last one here, we're just going to say constructor. No, not construct. Constructor with, again, the diamond brackets and the question mark. And we want to say packet play out entity head rotation constructor equals get NMS class packet play out named, entity head rotation dot get constructor. And then that's going to be get NMS class entity and byte.class because this takes in a byte and an entity as arguments. We're going to go down here. We're going to say float yaw equals, and we're going to cast a float. We're going to say this dot entity player dot get class dot get field yaw dot get this dot entity player. This will basically just access our yaw value inside of the entity player object we have. And then we just want to go ahead and say object packet. I'm just going to copy it from up here because I don't feel like typing this out all again. Equals the constructor dot new instance. We need this dot entity player, and then we need to cast a byte, and we need to say in parentheses again yaw times 256 divided by 360, and that'll basically convert our yaw value into a byte. That works with what we need here. And we just say send packet player and that packet head rotation. And then, of course, this is now going to highlight because I've already typed all this out. And we can just go ahead and make that work fine. Okay, cool. So we're almost done here. So now the final finishing touch is just the send packet method. And this is going to be super easy. So let's go ahead and do try and catch. Exception, ex.print stack trace, general stuff. We're going to say object handle equals player dot get class dot get method get handle dot invoke, and then we're going to not packet player. And this is just going to get the not the player connection, but this is going to get the handle off of the player. That's basically that little bit of code there. And then we're going to get our player connection. So we just say object player connection equals handle dot get class dot get method. No. Is it field? Yeah, it's field. Get field player connection. If I could spell connection dot get, and then we're going to pass in our handle. And then down here we're just going to say player connection dot get class dot get method send packet. We're going to get say comma get NMS class packet because that's the value we want to give it, and that's what the send packet method that we want to use. That's its argument. We're going to say dot invoke, and player connection is going to be our first argument, and then packet is our second. Awesome. So we're done. Again, this is going to highlight because life. Okay, so now that we're good to go there, we can go ahead and delete that line of code there. Awesome. So we're done. That is now converted to reflection. You can go ahead and run it on your server. I'm not going to because, we're fine. We've already done this before. So yeah, that is our tutorial there. So let's just go ahead and skim over this quickly. And I don't think I ever explained what .invoke does. So this basically just calls the method. Hopefully you all were able to pick up on that one because I didn't say it. It's pretty self-explanatory though. So as you can see, we got our Minecraft server right here. We got our world server. Game profile stuff stayed the same. We made constructors. We got our, the constructor we wanted using this array here. We sent all the packets, and then we got NMS class and Bukkit classes here. Okay, that is it for this tutorial. Very, very complex stuff. If you didn't get it, just go ahead and rewatch it, and maybe watch it at a later date, or when you're not tired or busy or something, because this is very heavy stuff to take in, and you should probably watch it several times if you want to use this in the future. Other than that, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you do have any suggestions, please make sure to leave them down in the comments below. Other than that, take care.
Alright, kick back, relax, and let's hit it again. While you go tell your mother, father, cousin, the kid named your